Hey couples, it's Brian and Tracy. Congrats, you've made it to week number 3 in our pre-marriage basics series. That means we're going to talk today about earning trust from day number 1. This is the second of 3 pillars of a healthy marriage. And Tracy, this is probably the toughest of all the lessons in this series, because when you talk about trust, that's when you dig into some of the issues, some of the problems, some of the skeletons in your closet from the past.
Yeah, I mean, trust is a very important piece to a healthy marriage, but you might have some baggage from a past relationship. You might have some bad things that have happened in the past in your dating relationship together that kind of brings up some harder feelings, but it's really good to kind of work through that, identify those areas where trust maybe needs to be earned some more so that this can be a really healthy part of your relationship.
So let's start with a definition. Trust is relying on the integrity or the ability of another person. And what that means is your ability to trust someone is based on their character, not yours.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest misunderstanding about trust. A lot of people think, okay, if I can't trust my husband or my fiance, then that's my issue. But by the basic definition of trust, what it's talking about is the character of the other person. You give trust as someone earns it, as someone shows trustworthy behavior. So it really is about the other person's character, not yours.
Let's think about it for a second in biblical terms. Deuteronomy 7, God speaking, he says, "Understand therefore that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commandments." In other words, God himself is a trustworthy God. It's part of his character. It's part of his nature to be faithful. He doesn't ask us to blindly trust him. He earns our trust through his faithfulness. And this really leads to the second principle, the second pillar of a healthy marriage. Trust is earned, not freely given. And that's why in marriage, every spouse needs to work hard to earn trust every day.
Yes, so hopefully you guys have already been establishing trust in your dating and engagement time, but going into marriage, you want to make sure that you're earning trust from one another in every word that you say and every action that you take, because trust is earned. You shouldn't just freely trust your fiance if they have no reason to be trusted, right? If they don't have a track record of faithfulness, of being true to their word and to deed, then you shouldn't be trusting them. And maybe that's what has tied you guys up in the past, is maybe you trusted your fiance in a situation and they failed in some way. Now, that doesn't mean that they've forever failed and there's no coming back from that. But what it means is you need to start working on how does your fiance start to earn your trust back in that area where they lost it.
Yeah, Trace, so let's say that there's a couple out there that's saying, look, we've already sent out invitations. We've already set the date. It would be kind of embarrassing at this point if we hit pause and said, wait, we got to figure some stuff out first. If there's some red flags or yellow flags, shouldn't you just power through them at this point?
No, I think it's wise to take the time. And again, for you couples that are doing pre-marriage counseling, this is good for you. So this is your time to maybe unearth or to look at some of those issues or things that maybe you have in your heart of like, I'm not sure if I trust him or her in this particular situation, or they did this and it really caused me to question their motivation or their character. Then talk about it now. It doesn't mean that it has to be a deal breaker, but if you go into your marriage and think that those trust issues aren't going to follow you and aren't just going to get bigger and bigger the more you bring your life together, you're mistaken. So it's worth the time to do it now, and you can earn trust back if you've lost it.
Let's key in on trust just a little bit more. There are 3 qualities we want you to talk about with your mentoring couple on this topic. Trust is, number 1, reactive. Trust is, number 2, measurable. And then finally, building trust happens slowly over time, like building up a bank account. So trust is reactive, it's measurable, and it takes time to build.
Yeah, and here's what's important about that. So by the definition, we've already established that trust is reactive, right? You're going to give trust as someone earns it. But the second piece is then if trust is broken, then how do you know if you could ever earn it back? Well, it's because trust is measurable. So if your fiance has done something in the past that really breached your trust, then what you'd need to say is, okay, if you were going to earn my trust back, you would be doing X, Y, and Z. And if you're doing those three things, then you're earning my trust back, right? So it's measurable. There's a way to count it. There's a way to measure if trust is building back up or not. And then, of course, it's also important to recognize that it takes time to earn it back, like building up our savings account, right? So everything that we do, we're either making deposits in our trust account, or when we mess up and make a mistake, we're taking a withdrawal. So it's going to take some time. You just want to make sure you never get in a situation in your relationship where you've had more withdrawals than deposits in that trust account.
Now, there's one more thing we have to touch on here, and we always like to do this when we're talking about trust. Trust is reactive, but forgiveness is proactive. And that means that extending forgiveness opens the door to restoring broken trust. So if you're getting into this conversation and you start feeling defensive or you start feeling bitter or whatever it is, I think sometimes when you're honest with one another and some issues come to light, you have to have really at the base of your relationship, you have to have a starting point of forgiveness. Look, I'm willing to forgive, but we need to be honest so we can continue to build trust and move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that if you extend forgiveness, that doesn't mean that you just wipe the slate totally clean. Forgiveness is different than trust by its very nature, right? Trust is a reactive response, but forgiveness is a choice that you make, a gift that you give to your fiancé to say, you know what, you messed up here, but I'm going to forgive you for that. But that doesn't mean I trust you yet. And so now we got to start working on building the trust back. But if you don't have a forgiving heart, and if you're going to just always hold it over the other person's head, then you really can't ever get that engine moving towards a trusting relationship.
Let's finish with one more scripture. Colossians 3, it says, "Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others." And forgiveness is key. It goes hand in hand while we're talking about trust. So you've got a lot to talk about in this lesson. Use those questions below to talk about it with your mentoring couple. And then we'll see you next time for our final lesson in the series.